Calling Sterling Heights City Council, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials, grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Mrs. Zarko?
Present.
Mrs. Kosky?
Present.
Mr. Lusk?
Here.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Shannon?
Present.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Here.
Council, we need approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our agenda is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to begin this evening by outlining a program that was started back on March 1st, 2016 under the Great Lakes Water Authority. And the name of the program is called the Water Residential Assistance Program, or better known as WRAP. It provides homeowners direct assistance with bill payment and arrearages, as well as funds for home audits and fixture repairs and replacements that will conserve system resources and further reduce the amount of homeowners' bills moving forward. City of Sterling Heights was one of the first communities to sign up for the WRAP program. We currently have about 50 residents enrolled in the program, which is now entering its second year. WRAP participants receive $25 per month toward their water bill, plus assistance with arrearages up to $1,000 per year. So I want to make sure that anyone who's having trouble, seniors or others, this program is available to you. You can either call the City of Sterling Heights, 446-CITY, to get more information, or you can go to the Great Lakes Water Authority's website, and they have a lot of information there, and that address is glwater.org. I also wanted to highlight a major construction project that's going to be starting up in the next couple of months, and I'll draw attention to the screen in front of you. This is on 16 Mile Road, just west of Van Dyke, and the site will include development of a 127,000 square foot industrial building that's going to be associated with production of the new Ram pickup truck. Many of you know that the Ram pickup truck is now going to be produced and, I should say, assembled in Sterling Heights at the Sterling Heights Assembly Plant, known as SHAP. And so that construction work will begin very soon. You should be seeing this on the screen in front of you, but I see it's not there. It may pop up shortly. In any case, this facility will be where trucks come off the assembly line and then they go across the street. It's right in front of the KUKA building on Metro Parkway. So for those of you who are familiar with that building, so right where the post office is, directly to the south of that facility. We expect it'll be starting up in the next couple of months. They need to get it constructed quickly. The production of the Ram will begin later on this year. So it's one more indication of all the construction activity going on along the Van Dyke corridor and the huge economic impact that manufacturing has in our city with all these spin-off developments. There's another property, obviously, used to be Sunnybrook. Almost all of those new buildings up there are related to manufacturing, many of them the Ram pickup truck. No, that's okay. We'll move on to the next item. As you all know, Sterling Fest is coming up later on this month, and I'd like to show a video, hopefully this works, highlighting all the festivities going on at Sterling Fest this year. I can assure you this is much more exciting than a slide I was going to show you about the manufacturing
Heights and
building.
Dodge Park a destination as tens of thousands attend Sterling Fest Arts and Music Fair. 2017 Sterling Fest promises to be nothing but a good time. Sterling Fest runs from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on July 27th, 28th, and 29th. Events such as the Art Fair, the Midway, Jazz and Blues Stage, Food Court, Kids Fest tent, Sterling Fest 5K, and the Suds and Sounds tent, offering something for everyone. Concerts at the Sterling Fest. The last weekend of July makes Sterling Heights and Dodge Park a destination as tens of thousands attend Sterling Fest Arts and Music Fair. The 2017 Sterling Fest promises to be nothing but a good time. Sterling Fest runs from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on July 27th, 28th, and 29th. Events such as the Art Fair, the Midway, Jazz and Blues Stage, Food Court, Kids Fest tent, Sterling Fest 5K, and the Suds and Sounds tent, offering something for everyone. Concerts at the Sterling Fest main stage will be a key attraction. Legendary frontman Bret Michaels rocks the Dodge Park band shell. Opening for Bret Michaels will be the up-and-coming punk band Black Tie Event. Bret Michaels performs on Saturday, July 29th. The concert series begins Thursday, July 27th with the popular cover band, the Killer Flamingos, who recently won Metro Times Best Cover Band for 2017. Classic rockers, the Detroit Jedis will open up for the Killer Flamingos. Friday night, July 28th, has Rod Stewart tribute artist Danny D and the Vagabonds performing the best of Rod Stewart. Danny D has the distinction of being the only tribute artist to perform with the actual Rod Stewart. Opening for Danny D will be Sterling Heights Battle of the Bands winner, Blue Spectrum. Sterling Fest is July 27th, 28th, and 29th. Don't miss it.
I hope and pray the weather is good. I think we're due for a solid 3 days of perfect weather this year. I wanted to remind everyone, this is the topic of the day. Please be reminded that consumer-grade fireworks cannot be used after 11 p.m. this evening. This is the last day of the holiday that the state law permits it, and Sterling Heights bans it the rest of the time. So any further usage is banned until Labor Day, and then there'll be 3 more days on that holiday weekend. Police officers have already issued numerous tickets and made a number of arrests related to illegal use of fireworks. Enforcement will continue the rest of this week and into through next weekend as well. We have officers in unmarked cars. We're doing the best we possibly can to catch individuals who are setting these off. Well, after today, anytime, but even over the last couple of days, after 11 o'clock or throughout the day, which is when they're illegal in Sterling Heights. It's very difficult to catch individuals doing it, but we are doing the best we can. I think we'll have some relief soon. There's been numerous attempts to repeal this legislation at the state level. Unfortunately, none of the bills have moved out of committee, and there's little hope that they will move out of committee unless there's some sort of statewide public uprising over this. It's incredibly disruptive to communities. It's very disruptive to veterans and pets and seniors and so on. So we have fought this. We've sent letters. We've testified. We've worked with our local legislators, including Representative Viennes and previously Representative Farrington. They've done the best they can, but we need help from the general populace to repeal this legislation. So if you have the chance to write the governor a letter, you can email him, you can call his office, or you can call Senator Rocca, Representative Viennes, Representative Farrington, and express your displeasure and demand that there be a repeal. And lastly, Mayor, this evening, at the conclusion of the agenda, I'm requesting that the City Council convene a closed session under Section 8H of the Open Meetings Act to consult with the city's legal counsel regarding the trial or settlement strategy in connection with pending litigation, and under Section 8C to discuss strategy in connection with the collective bargaining negotiations. And I shouldn't have said that as the last item, because I do want to recognize someone in the audience. We have an administrative intern. Her name is Hannah Tadros, who's been working with us very hard in our office this summer, and she's here at the meeting. We appreciate the good work she's done, and welcome to our meeting. And Mayor, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. Next item on our agenda tonight is a presentation to receive the 2016 Project of the Year from the Michigan Chapter of American Public Works Association for the Dodge Park Road Reconstruction City Project number 14-254. We have a presentation from our city engineer, Brent Bayshaw. Mr. Bayshaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council. Mr. Vanderpool. As you all know, in 2016, the city embarked on a reconstruction project to reconstruct Dodge Park Road 1.9 miles from Metro Parkway all the way to Utica Road. Although the project was completed last year, it really was many years in the planning and became a reality in 2013. We received federal funding to cover 80% of the cost of the projects. Now, the project began with the key component of replacing the pavement. Obviously, the pavement was in deteriorated condition, but the project really became much more than that. Geometric improvements were completed that improved the safety and functionality of all users of the roadway, and a dedicated center turn lane was built with decel lanes built at all the intersections as well. And this replaced the mostly two-lane pavement cross-section that previously existed. The project was designed with the city's complete streets and 2030 visioning guidelines principles as the backbone. Sidewalk gaps were filled in, pedestrian crossings and school crossings were made safer and ADA compliant, and also a 10-foot wide shared use trail was constructed, which included a new bridge over the Plumbrook Drain. This quality of life look at the road improvements created pedestrian connectivity to parks, commercial businesses. It created safe paths to the schools along the corridor. It created exercise options, and it created just a place just to take your family for a stroll if that's what you wanted to do. The stretch of the road is very unique as it contains 3 schools that front the road and many more schools that directly impact the project area. It also contained commercial properties, places of worship, police station, library, and district court. And of course, many residential properties. Now, all these entities are collectively called the community, and this truly was a community project. The community input was strong right from the design of the project and all the way through construction. A construction goal was created to complete the project in 1 calendar year while accommodating community events such as the Memorial Day Parade and Sterling Fest, while keeping a safe roadway for vehicles and pedestrians alike to use. The project was also closely coordinated with the city center improvements, which is ongoing through the Dodge Park construction. The 1-year goal was met and the project was completed in 2016. Special thanks should be made to Utica Community Schools for their extraordinary efforts to accommodate this project. Also, special thanks to the local businesses, churches, commuters, and residents affected by everyday construction. Special thank you to prime contractor Dan's Excavating, who did a great job providing a quality, on-time project. Special thanks to consulting engineers Hubble, Roth, and Clark for their outstanding work on the project. And lastly, a special thanks to City Council for the support of the projects and their hands-on approach to creating the final project that we see today. I'm proud to announce that the city has been recognized on many levels since the completion of this project. The project received an award from the Michigan Concrete Association, which beat out over 70 projects for the Urban Collector Road of the Year. It also won 2 awards from the American Public Works Association, one for the Metro Detroit Region Transportation Project of the Year, and recently won the statewide award project for the APWA Transportation Project of the Year. So I'd like to introduce now Chuck Hart, who's the president for the statewide chapter of the APWA, to present the award.
Thank you for having me here today. As Brent mentioned, my name is Chuck Hart. I'm here representing the State of Michigan American Public Works Association. Just a little bit about our organization. We appreciate the opportunity to present this in front of council. Public works is a very important part of our lives, and our organization strives to educate the public, educate administrations to show the benefits and what the importance of our public works are. We primarily focus on training, education at all levels, including DPW directors, operators, supervisors, engineers, and the whole collective group of public works officials. To add to what Mr. Bayshaw had mentioned, a project like the Dodge Park project takes thousands and thousands of hours to plan and implement, and it really is a testament to a great public works project, and it's my honor to be here to present this to you all today. With that, Mr. Mayor and Council, if you'd like to come down, I'll present this award.
Well, I think we'll get a picture this way, I think, and we'll have the council kind of gather in, and Brent, come on in.
Congratulations on your award.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all for
Yeah,
having me.
thank you very much.
Appreciate it. It's a
Appreciate you
great
coming here and
project.
giving it to us. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, I just want to briefly say thank you to Brent and to Mr. Hart and everybody at HRC and everybody in the city that worked on this project. The amount of accolades that they all received is, they're well deserved. I think it's a fantastic roadway, and it's really great to see that this is kind of the street that leads into our major park. It leads into our city hall. It's going to be where our Parks and Recreation, 122,000 square foot building will be in a couple of years. So this is really the gateway into our city, and to do such a great job and really transform Dodge Park in that way. I think everyone involved deserves a round of applause. So thank you for everything. With that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a public hearing to consider the request by MoreTech Manufacturing Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 37641 Mound Road. We have a presentation from our Senior Economic Development Advisor, Luke Bonner. Mr. Bonner.
Good evening, Mayor Taylor, members of council, and Manager Vanderpool. This item is regarding an IFEC application for MoreTech Manufacturing, Inc. MoreTech Manufacturing, Inc. and MoreTech Design actually together operate 3 facilities in Sterling Heights. This project will be to consolidate those operations and also expand in the future in a 43,000 square foot headquarters and research and manufacturing facility with a proposed investment amount of $3,038,000 at 37641 Mound Road. Staff is recommending a 5-year tax abatement consistent with the term of their lease at the facility with Kemp and Sherman. And over that 5-year term, it is anticipated that $61,350 of net new tax revenue will be generated for the city. In the audience tonight, and actually would like to invite Dave and his partner up, the owners of MoreTech. They're going to do a much better job of explaining what they do, and with much more passion than I can, because it's some really cool stuff we've talked about at the last meeting, but David Clark is here to talk about the company.
Hi, Mayor Taylor and council members. I want to thank you guys for reviewing our application. I want to tell you a little bit about MoreTech real quick without boring everybody to death. We've been a business for the city of Sterling Heights for about 25 years. We've leased or owned various buildings in the city of Sterling Heights over that time. About 9 years ago, we started edging more. We started out a design company. We're edging ever closer to full tech company now. Over these carts or vehicles that everybody may have heard the term AGV if they're paid attention to the newspapers. AGC is a very similar product. It's just a different flavor. We've since 2009 become a huge player in this market. We have a 10-year contract with General Motors, in fact, for this kind of vehicle. We're also now, over the last few years, have been selling them globally and are in the process of developing 2 new vehicles this year and several other products that are used throughout the industry. So this year already, we've hired 5 people this year and 3 last year. So our expansion plans are rapidly growing, and I'm quite certain that the estimates for the amount of people we'll be hiring is very conservative, because we've already actually this year surpassed what we had anticipated. So we have 2 more people coming on at the end of this year. So things are going great, and we've now become, like I said, kind of a global player in this. We have IT people coming on and computer engineers that are very interested in coming to work for us, and we've actually been able to lure some very top candidates. So it's an exciting business. It's a huge business that's coming down the pike. As you know, automation is obviously a big business, and we're trying to stay in the forefront. We have our products now. We're continuing to develop new products that will probably blow the industry away, to be honest with you. So if you guys have any questions, I can take them. We also have worked with local schools before, and I look forward to working with the city of Sterling Heights to not only employ Sterling Heights residents, but we do also offer lots of community, because some of our vendors that we have here locally are also Sterling Heights companies. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys and making sure that happens in an accelerated pace. So if you have
All
any
right.
questions.
Well, what we'll do is we'll take public comment.
Yep.
We'll open up the public hearing, and then when the council deliberates, if we have any questions, we'll call you back up at that time.
Sure.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Bonner, anything else?
No further comments.
This time I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this item? Mr. Judnick.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Joe Judnick, Sterling Heights. I'm opposed to this tax abatement, as I have every other one that's come up here. The gentleman just spoke about how fantastic his business is. Business is growing leaps and bounds, hiring people left and right, and now he's going to come here and ask for a couple of free crumbs. They don't work. Businesses are going to grow whether you give them a tax abatement or not. We need the money for our city. Our roads are just absolutely atrocious, and that's where I would put the money. So we're only getting half of what we should be getting, and that's not enough. We should be getting all 100%. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing, and council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Schmidt.
resolved to adopt the resolution approving the application by MoreTech Manufacturing Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 37641 Mound Road for a period of 5 years in accordance with the guidelines established by City Council, and the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized to sign as applicable all documents required in conjunction with this approval.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Just a few comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being in our community for 25 years and look forward to having you continue in our community. $3+ million investment in Sterling Heights says a lot to me about how you feel about being here. And 61+ $1,000 over 5 years in tax money. I appreciate that as well. So good luck to you, and I look forward to our continued relationship. Thank you.
Council, any further discussion on this item? Mr. Lusk.
I think this is a perfect example of why we have these events, right? Why we have companies that come in that have invested in the city, continue to invest in the city, and I'll support everyone that comes in front of us when they're increasing revenue, when they're hiring new people, so thank you.
Council, any further discussion? With no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing to consider the request by Mancini Enterprises LLC for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 42605 Van Dyke. Presentation from Senior Economic Development Advisor Luke Bonner. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mayor. So this particular item tonight, we would request for postponement. This is actually a speculative building designation and not an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate. So unfortunately, through this process, we made the wrong request. So at the request of the council, we'd ask that this please be postponed to August 1st.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bonner. So just to clarify, this is the wrong type of treatment that needs to be given for this type of building. Public notice went out, and there is a public hearing that has to be held. So I will open the public hearing at this point with that caveat that ultimately administration is recommending to postpone this and to set a hearing for the speculative building designation. So I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this item? Mr. Jednick.
Joe Judnick, Sterling Heights. Well, it's not going to be a tax abatement tonight, but it will be sooner or later. So I'm opposed to this. I would just say don't even put it on the agenda. This is simply just a commercial building that was put up. So now are we giving tax breaks to developers that put up just a building and then they're going to lease it out? No, we need 100% of the tax revenue from all of our businesses in the city, not just 50%. If a resident were to put an addition on their house, like these business owners do, the property, the paint wouldn't even be dry yet, and we would have our tax assessor out there assessing that house and adding more tax revenue to it. So I'm opposed to this. When it comes up, I'll speak on the issue again. Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing. And council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Resolved to postpone indefinitely consideration of an industrial facilities exemption certificate at 42605 Van Dyke, and to set a public hearing on Tuesday, August 1st, 2017, at 7:30 p.m. regarding the application by Mancini Enterprises LLC for a speculative building designation at 42605 Van Dyke.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is another public hearing to consider the request by Cadillac Ferndale Corporation to establish a plant rehabilitation district at 7,000 15 Mile Road. Presentation from Mr. Bonner. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mayor. Cadillac Ferndale Corporation has filed an application to establish a plant rehab district on real property known as 7,000 15 Mile Road. A new investment estimated at $3 million is planned to completely renovate the interior and exterior of the property, including increasing the roof height to meet today's industrial standards. And in order for any new real property investment to be eligible for a tax abatement under an IFEC, these parcels must be placed in a plant rehab district. Cadillac Products facility was originally constructed in 1957 with warehouse additions in 1966, and the total combined space of the building is approximately 150,000 square feet. Proposed renovations to the facility include increasing the ceiling height by 6 feet in manufacturing space with a hydraulic lift system, high-class landscaping commonly seen on corporate headquarters locations, a mixture of materials such as brick, metal, and stone that will upgrade the facade of the building to a Class A level. And as we've talked about on many occasions, there's a dearth for manufacturing space in Southeast Michigan. And so this project will actually bringing online essentially a dormant 150,000 square foot building. In order to allow the owners to be competitive in this market, the project actually isn't eligible for a traditional industrial facilities exemption certificate, but because the building is at least 50% functionally obsolete, the plant rehab district will allow a freeze or maintenance of the current tax rate that they're already paying in order to provide, again, a competitive lease to what we hope to be a high-end industrial client for that facility. Representatives of the ownership are here in the audience tonight, and I had invited them up to give just a glimpse of what actually is going to be happening at the building and what kind of things what we can expect going forward.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, Mr. Vanderpool. My name is Roger Williams. I'm the treasurer of Cadillac Ferndale Corporation and Cadillac Products Incorporated. Cadillac Ferndale Corporation is a real estate holding company which in large measure leases properties to our operating companies, Cadillac Products. This facility will not be rented to Cadillac Products. We intend to rent it to other tenants. The prospective tenants that we've talked to so far, we haven't had anything signed, but the prospective tenants are talking about employment anywhere from 40 to 100 people. And the investment that we'll be making is grown from the last time we spoke with Mr. Bonner. We're currently looking at an investment of $3.7 million, and it may go a bit higher from there. I'm encouraged by the presentation that you heard from Mr. Bonner. I think he did a pretty thorough job of explaining what we have in mind. We want to upgrade that facility, make it something that the community can be proud of, and that will support the economy of the community. Does anyone have any questions for me?
What we'll do is we'll open up the public hearing, take comments from the residents, and then if anybody has any questions for you under our deliberation, that's when we'll call you back up, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. With that, I will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Mr. Judnick.
Good evening, Council. Joe Judnick. I'd like to, first of all, thank Mr. Williams and congratulate him for buying that building that's been there forever and ever, been vacant. It's ugly, it's terrible. I'm all for this gentleman to put the money into that and get this building up and refurbished. It is absolutely a terrible eyesore, and it's just going to sit there and just collapse. So thank you very much, Mr. Williams, for coming into Sterling Heights, and I support this very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Judnick. Anyone else on this item? Mrs. Early.
Good evening, Jasmine Early. I just had a quick question. In the other development, it mentioned that they were hiring people from Sterling Heights. Do we know that from those 40 to 100 people that are going to be hired are local residents? I would like to know if our city has something that requires the companies that are having business in our city, at the same way they are required to hire minorities. Are they required to hire local residents? Will this company do that for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Early. Anyone else on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing. Council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
resolve to adopt the resolution approving the application by Cadillac Ferndale Corporation to establish a plant rehabilitation district at 7,015 Mile Road. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Zarko.
I just want to thank Mr. Williams and all of your associates for taking the time to reinvest in this particular building. It is an eyesore. You can tell it's old. It's been here for a long time. It's been here longer than the city's been a city. So it does need a facelift, and we're glad that you're putting the money into it. So good luck, and we'll be watching your, restoration. Thank you.
Council, any further discussion? With no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, and good luck to you guys, all three petitioners. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is to consider an ordinance introduction of ordinances amending Article 28 of zoning ordinance number 278 and Chapter 12 of the City Code to regulate the licensing and operation of new and existing banquet facilities and accessory banquet or event uses. We have a presentation from our city planner, Chris McLeod. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Vanderpool. As noted before you tonight are two different ordinance amendments or potential ordinance amendments up for introduction. One includes changes to the city zoning ordinance. The other would be to the overall city code of regulations in regards to banquet and event centers within the city. This actually all began back in November of 2016, where the City Council passed a moratorium in terms of the opening and operation of new banquet facilities, as well as any expansion of existing facilities. This was done due to the fact that the city at that time lacked any ordinances or regulations governing that type of use. That moratorium, again, was for 6 months. It was extended an additional 3 months, which is covering us at this particular point, and is set to expire within the month here. So during the moratorium, Office of Planning, the Police Chief, Fire Marshal, and City Attorney's Office all worked together to develop these proposed amendments, again, both zoning ordinance as well as city code. And the idea behind this, if we could switch to a presentation, that would be wonderful, was again to better protect the neighboring property owners, the city residents as a whole, and those who attend functions at these facilities. The city was seeing a proliferation of not only new banquet facilities, but also ancillary banquet facilities. Most restaurants that you go to now, or places that you can have a drink or to eat at, have some sort of room that can be rented or set aside for a banquet type operation. So the city wanted to make sure that we had a full understanding of what the potential impacts of these uses were and what the potential regulations would need to be. So as we developed the ordinance, it became evident that we needed to basically develop two different regulations, two different provisions. One which would deal with an overall banquet or event facility, which is kind of your traditional banquet area that you would think of. You go there specifically for a wedding event, a funeral event, something of that nature. But then this accessory banquet use also came to light. And as we looked at different restaurant websites and called around to different restaurant uses, it became apparent that many of these facilities had rooms of 50, 75, 100, where people could rent a room. So those we felt also needed to at least have some form of regulation to them. So in terms of who is impacted with these new provisions, so again, we have two different types of regulations going on. One is a zoning provision, one is the regulatory provision. The zoning provision would cover all new banquet facilities going in. So any new full-blown banquet facility or event facility use would require a special approval land use from the Planning Commission. Existing banquet facilities would be grandfathered in. Most of you know that clause. However, if that facility was enlarged or significantly altered, they may require additional special land use approval. The licensing provisions, which is part of the regulatory aspect of the ordinance, is all banquet facilities are required to get a license under the ordinance. There'll be a two-step process in terms of the licensing provision. Again, full-blown banquet centers and ancillary banquet facilities. I do want to note, as an ancillary banquet facility, if you're not open past 11 p.m., you're exempt from the ordinance provisions. We did notice, again, in our research that a number of the ancillary uses closed the banquet portion of or the potential banquet portion of that site earlier than 11 p.m. So we felt that, if you were closing that early, that there probably would be minimal impact to those surrounding properties. So therefore, we exempted them from the ordinance. So again, zoning requirements would be for any new or modified standalone banquet event facility. Those uses would be allowed as a special land use in the C2, C3, and C4 districts, our three most intensive business districts. Accessory banquet uses would be allowed in our residential zoning districts, but again, that's an ancillary banquet use. So if you have a golf course facility, you can have an ancillary banquet facility at that location. If you have a place of worship that also has a banquet type facility, that would be, again, an accessory use to that permittable use itself. When does the license itself, when must it be obtained, and how long is that license valid for? So by January 5th of this coming year, 2018, all banquet facilities within the city must retain a license. And then a license would be valid for 2 years, unless, again, the license is suspended or revoked for the reasons set forward in the ordinance itself. What are the penalties? For the first major violation of the proposed license are a civil infraction, which would be a $500 fine. Subsequent violations would incur within a 12-month period, would be misdemeanors and addressed in the court system. In addition, a second violation of the same provision or a third violation of the entire licensing ordinance would allow for or potentially lead to a suspension of the license or potentially even a revocation of the license as the penalties continue to increase as you go forward. So that's kind of a summation. I want to go through real quick, though, in terms of, this is kind of a flow chart of how the process would actually work if we could go back to this computer screen real quick. So in terms of, you can see there's two different facilities here, or two different facility types. On the left-hand side is a main principal use. All new and existing facilities require a license. You skip all the way down, get to your application point, and then it goes down through the system itself. Accessory banquet use facilities, it goes through a series of steps. If you're not open past 11 p.m., you're exempt. If you are open past 11 p.m., you continue to move down the chain. If you have less than 2 events per year, you continue, or you move to the side, you can do those as temporary uses. And if you do have more than 2 uses per year, you continue to move down the chain and you get your application. Now, 2 things I want to point out. If you're adjacent to residential property, you're required to do a nuisance mitigation plan. So if you're a new facility or an expanded facility, you do a nuisance mitigation plan. You may have heard that as part of our outdoor patio space ordinance. We followed that same process. So if you are adjacent to residential and a new or expanded facility, you have to do one of those plans showing how you're not going to impact the adjacent residential properties. Or if you're an existing facility and you have violations within the previous year or get violations during the course of the operation of the facility moving forward, you would also be required a nuisance mitigation plan. So that is kind of, and that nuisance mitigation plan is reviewed by the Planning Commission. I just wanted to note that as well. The one other thing I would like to note, between the Planning Commission public hearing on the zoning ordinance, where the Planning Commission recommended approval of the zoning ordinance perspective of this, the city held a city forum in terms of, we invited about 48 of the banquet facilities or restaurants that we knew of, and doing some pretty exhaustive research in terms of those facilities. About 11 signed in. I think there was more than that. That number was probably closer to 20 in terms of who actually participated within that meeting. The feedback was actually very good in terms of this ordinance. They provided a lot of valuable input in terms of where the temporary use provision came from. That came specifically from some of the restaurants that said, we may only have 1 event per year, which might be New Year's Eve. Do we really have to go through this whole ordinance process for 1 night? We felt that that was very good input, so we changed the ordinance based on that forum. But otherwise, the feedback was very good. Most of the restaurants and banquet facilities actually said they felt more comfortable having the licensing provision. They felt that it probably secured their space, so to speak, in terms of being a banquet or a restaurant facility within the city. So they seem very supportive. So with that, that kind of concludes just a synopsis of the 2 ordinances. And I'll be here to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Mr. Marshalones.
My name's Harry Marshalones. Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Vanderpool, I just listened to what I thought was the greatest collection of hogwash and drawings that I've ever seen in my life. I'm an engineer, and I can usually figure out what's happening from diagrams and documents, but I got to be honest with you. That didn't mean squat to me, everything you said. You're talking about ancillary this, and if they break the rule here. What was the original rule? We don't know what the original rule is. We don't know what they do to break it. Now, I know I can't talk to the people behind me, but I'll bet you if anybody back there understood what was just said, they would raise their hand. I think you'd be very disappointed to find out there's not many people back there that really have a clue as to what's going on. So we're going to have to rely on you guys and assume that if you say, yes, we're going to change this rule, that you do understand it. And just for the tickles and giggles, I'm going to talk to each one of you at one time before the next meeting, and I'm going to ask you exactly what this was all about. And boy, I sure hope you got a good story, because I'm going to be up here again after when the citizens get to talk about it, and I'm going to say, hey, so-and-so, I talked to him, and he didn't know nothing about what he voted for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marshallones. Who'd like to be next? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's William McGregor. I've basically worked in the food service industry my entire life. The only thing I would ask of the council going forward with this is I would like that for the city and the members of the city to have a chance to go over the details of this more in depth. I would ask for maybe a motion to postpone this to August 1st, your next meeting, so more information about this can get out. Because I'm really curious. It wasn't really clear what the difference is being. Okay, so there's like ServSafe certifications that everyone gets for serving food. And those are really strict regulations. I'm not sure whether this is a maximum occupancy thing or just a noise thing. So I'd like more information to be released to the public before going forward with this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Anyone else? Mr. Jefferson?
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. Mr. McLeod, I want to ask him a question that maybe it could clear this all up. Maybe he can come back and explain it to us in plain English. But let's say the new facility up there at Maple Lanes. How can you explain how this affects that facility up there that is going to be a banquet hall at that new facility compared to Payne's? Okay, so maybe you can use those two examples of clearing this up for people, because you were speaking in hieroglyphics to most people. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Norgrove?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I know Mr. McLeod probably didn't want to get into some things that were mentioned at the Planning Commission. Actually, I have to go against Harry Marshall on it. Didn't sound like double talk. If you watched the Planning Commission, you knew exactly what they were trying to do. We have banquet halls that rent areas of our strip malls and blow out walls without the fire inspectors knowing about it until it's too late. We have banquet halls that operate till well into the night with no teeth in our ordinance. We ask these questions, the Planning Commission and Mr. McLeod. The city has to crack down on some of these banquet halls. When they stay open late, they're bothering the neighbors. There's one in particular I won't mention, but those neighbors have been complaining for almost 5-6 years now. They get no respite from the city because there's pretty much nothing the city can do. So I agree with this ordinance 100%. We went over it. We talked about it. Maybe Mr. McLeod wants to touch on some of the concerns. But clearly we do have an influx of banquet halls opening up in the city. Somebody gets some money, they want to open up a banquet hall. We have to have some teeth into this ordinance so that we're not going to be tearing down businesses and saying, well, I'm just going to open up a banquet hall and make free money. So we have to have this ordinance, and I'm sorry that people here think it's a lot of double talk, or the people at home. There's a reason we're doing this, and it has to be done now or we'll lose control. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Norgrove. Anyone else on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
I'll go with the first action. Resolve to introduce an amendment to zoning ordinance number 278 to establish new zoning regulations pertaining to new and existing banquet and event facilities and accessory banquet or event uses.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion, Mrs. Zarko?
I understand what we're trying to do. I know that probably, I would like a copy of the flow chart that you just gave us that tells us who's, I think that was a great example of how, who would have to, who would affect. So, but other than that, I have to agree that at some point we need to put something in place so that as these new halls open, that we have some new regulations. And I have to agree that there have been places that have opened without us knowing anything about it, and it does become a fire hazard. But, so it's through the chair to Mr. McLeod. Could you tell us now currently how many banquet facilities you think we have in the city? You did mention that you went to restaurants and about 40, but I'm sure there's got to be more than that.
Mr. McLeod.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. We did a pretty exhaustive search. Mr. Andrews from O'Reilly and Cilio did really spearheaded that search, and then the fire marshal chimed in, and then we kind of circulated the list. So while we don't think it's all inclusive, we feel that the 48 that were invited to that forum are pretty inclusive of the number of facilities that would fall under this. Are there going to be others that weren't found? Yes, absolutely. But, if we're right around 50 or so between either a true banquet facility or a use that provides accessory banquet type rooms, I think we're going to be just about there in terms of that number. So one way or another, that licensing provision will step in on those types of uses.
Right, and through the chair again, would this include like the new hotels that are being built? If they were to have like rooms for conferences, is that considered a banquet hall, a conference? How would that fall into this ordinance?
So with that, the hotel use would be basically deemed as the main or the principal use of the property. So if they did have a facility of this nature, it would be deemed as an accessory type banquet or event facility. That's why we added that term event use, because some of these gathering areas aren't necessarily truly food related. They may be event based. So, but the short answer is that in that term, a hotel would likely have to have an accessory banquet application filled out and licensed.
And I think you explained everything else and you answered my would-be questions in your presentation. So no further comments.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod. You had mentioned that restaurants would be exempt if they had 1 or 2 events per year. How are we going to police that?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
In terms of, as with any use, it goes through code enforcement, it goes through, getting the word out in terms of education that we do have these regulations. So it's a matter of being proactive on the education side, and then if we do start to find that there were uses or events that went on later than 11 o'clock, we go in and we simply educate them that we do have this provision. We begin to talk with them to say, how many of these events do you have per year? And then at that point, we determine whether they need to go through the full process or if they need to go through more of that temporary use process, depending on what their answers are. Obviously, with any use, if the information that's being provided to us isn't accurate, then it becomes an enforcement issue.
Okay. I have to agree that this is well past due. And I do agree with the 11 p.m. provision in there as well. I think we've run into situations where there are activities going on in these ancillary rooms in restaurants till all hours of the night. And we need to have a little more bite there prohibit that action, that activity from taking place. And I had one more question and I just lost it. And just for a point of clarification, is it Mr. McGregor? The entire packet, our backup material is online on Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, and it provides the entire explanation of what we're approving or we're moving forward to. This is a two-step process, so this is the introduction. So just for your information, that is out there for the public to see. And I have nothing further. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Koski.
Through the chair, the new zoning regulations that this ordinance is going to set forth, can you go over those, Mr. McLeod?
Mr. McLeod.
One more time so that everyone understands what we're adding, what we're changing.
So currently, the city has a singular provision within the zoning ordinance that mentions banquet facilities as kind of an ancillary use or almost as an afterthought within our C2 district. The city right now, in our mind's eyes, as well as I think our city attorney's eyes, not to speak for them, but the city needs additional regulations to protect themselves moving forward. So as we've gone through this provision, these provisions, and developed them through, again, meeting with the fire marshal, the police department, city staff, and so forth, it's determined that special land use approval would be the appropriate way to deal with main banquet facilities. Some of these uses have large impacts based on the size and capacity that they may have, as well as the traffic they may generate at peak times or at certain event times. So again, any new or expanded main banquet facility would require special approval land use through the Planning Commission. Site plans would need to be provided and so forth and reviewed by them. Ancillary or accessory banquet facility and event uses are typically deemed as a permissible use, again, as long as they're ancillary to a main use. So therefore, minimal, if any, review is necessary from the zoning ordinance perspective side of things. In those instances where an accessory banquet facility may be adjacent to residential or may be in a situation where additional landscaping or additional regulation may be necessary, the ordinance does give the flexibility to city staff to work with the applicant to get those assurances that the adjacent properties will be protected. So again, it's the zoning provisions of this are as least intrusive as possible, but while still protecting the city. But again, it's a special land use for main banquet facilities in C2, C3, and C4 districts. So we wanted to make sure we had all of our districts covered where these uses may be permissible. And then again, accessory banquet facilities are allowed in those same districts as well as within the residential districts.
It sounds like each case would be dealt with separately. Is that true? Am I understanding this correctly? As an example, where I'm coming from here, let's assume that there's a Knights of Columbus facility that is vacant. They want to sell it. They want to turn it into a banquet facility. What are the requirements? What would qualify this building to become a banquet facility? Or is this something that would be presented to the Planning Commission? They would then review it and see what effect that particular activity in that building would have on the neighborhood. It's surrounded totally residential, Main Street out in front.
And that's part of the reason that we chose the special land use approach was the fact that that's specifically why special land use is designed to do is take each case on a case-by-case basis. So you can take a look at the surrounding environment, what the intensity of the use is, and make your decision based on those factors. So the Planning Commission will get to take all of that into account. There are some minimum standards in terms of that it has to be on a major roadway and so forth, but most of the main provisions will easily be met by existing facilities and as well as probably new facilities as well. But the special land use allows the Planning Commission to dive a little bit deeper to talk about what is the proximity of the residences? What is the proximity to a senior facility or something? taking all those factors into account. What is the setbacks to its own property lines? Is the parcel a 10-acre piece and it's centrally located on that 10-acre piece, or is it a 1-acre piece that is essentially bursting at the seams with this use? So those impacts will all be different. And so on a case-by-case, for those uses that do require special land use approval, the Planning Commission will get to take all that into account.
And how are we going to monitor the facilities that have taken down a wall and created their accessory facility? Is that just going to be if a neighbor calls and says, oh, by the way, Sam here on the corner now has a banquet facility. He rented the unit next door and knocked down the wall, and they're using it.
So that will
How are we going to monitor those?
So that will obviously still be part of it. I mean, obviously, enforcement is always enhanced by those, residents or those other business owners within the community that are monitoring or self-monitoring things. But we'll also, as part of the licensing requirement, they'll also have to report that information as well. So while there may be a slight lag depending on when their license is up and needs to be renewed, they'll also have to report that information as well. So the idea behind the licensing is to make sure that we have a current reflection of exactly what's going on within that facility. We extended it out to 2 years to try to be a little easier on the facilities, so that way it wasn't as burdensome, but still, again, providing us with current manager information, current information in terms of the number of employees, the size, and so forth, and the operation of the facility. So all those things will be rolled into that. So again, you'll have kind of a double system, not only our enforcement, but also the self-reporting due to the licensing requirements.
Well, the main thing is we'll be able to go in and say, where's your license? Do you operate after 11 o'clock at night?
Correct. As part of the licensing requirement, the city will have the ability to go in and do inspections, if they feel that there is something being not operated properly. And that was one of the, in all honesty, that was one of the aspects of this, was that we do have some uses that don't operate correctly. And we wanted the ability to make sure that they were. And for the most part, most of our operations run seamlessly, and most of the businesses are going to be just fine with this ordinance. There will be no, other than a license every 2 years, there will be no change in their operation of business. Those who don't necessarily follow our rules and regulations, they'll have to come into compliance, with these ordinance provisions.
Well, my main concern here is maybe it's not strong enough. That's all the questions. Thank you.
All right, council, anyone else? Any discussion? Mr. Shannon?
Just briefly, through the chair to Mr. McLeod, is there a, I'm putting you on the spot here, is there a way that you could use some more basic language to kind of just an overview of what this is, so that, I want to make sure that all the residents understand what we're doing here. Is that possible? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, so in terms of the one comment was made, does this supersede or somehow impose our regulations on what maybe the health department does? It does not. Health department regulations, whether they're county or state regulations, are still in place. We're not superimposing that. So the zoning aspects is the actual use of the property. So the city has long had very minimal regulations in terms of where a banquet facility can go or not go within the city. These current provisions as proposed will specifically delineate when and where a banquet operation can go, both in terms of a main banquet facility as well as an ancillary banquet facility. So that's kind of the zoning aspect of it. The regulatory aspect of it, the licensing aspect of it, will be that again, right now, since we have essentially zero regulations in terms of the operation of a banquet facility or an ancillary banquet facility, this will provide the city with a licensing mechanism to, again, make sure that we have current information in terms of how or what's going on with that banquet facility, but also ensuring that that banquet facility is operating the way that the city expects it to operate. So, again, right now, there's zero regulation to do that. This will impose new regulations to make sure that they're operating within the way the city feels proper. Are they extending past 11 p.m.? No banquet facility should extend past 2 a.m. Those kinds of things. And so That's basically the gist of what's happening here. So again, every banquet license will be a 2-year license as what is currently proposed. There'll be a fee associated with that. That fee will probably be similar to what the outdoor patio fee would be. Probably $500 for a new one, $250 for a renewal. But again, that's a 2-year license. But,
If I could jump in on the licensing part. As of right now, because I think that I'm thinking of the same banquet facility that Mr. Norgrove was talking about, that I've gotten quite a few complaints from the residents that live behind it. At this point, we can go in and we can give them a fine for noise or, operating too late, but they can just continue to pay the fine and continue to operate. Is that correct?
that is correct. I mean, unless the city took even further measures, but in terms of this, the simple answer, that is correct.
Yeah, and so now with the licensing, we can give them their tickets, and eventually, if they get to the point of where, we could take their license away and they can no longer operate, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The penalty section of this is an escalating penalty provision. So it starts with fines, but quickly gets to either a suspension, which is a short-term removal of the license, or there could ultimately be a revocation of the license, which would mean that the banquet facility could no longer operate as such.
Thank you. I think you did a great job of explaining it. Hopefully, the resident out there is that he's satisfied with that explanation also. But I'm definitely in favor of this, and we'll be voting yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shannon. Anyone else on council? Just to sum things up and a couple of comments. So what we're doing here essentially, Mr. McLeod, is we're doing two separate things, two major or main components to what we're doing tonight with this ordinance is to establish zoning regulations. So let's talk about that very briefly. If I wanted to open up a banquet facility in Sterling Heights right now, before this ordinance goes into effect, where could I put it and what zoning regulations govern my proposed banquet facility?
Right now, you'd essentially be a C2 use, and other than that, there are no other regulations.
So it'd be like if I was opening up any other business. I mean, any other, not any other business, but any other business that's not specifically delineated in the zoning ordinance, I could just open up and start conducting business, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the problem that we're coming up against with this is that people are opening up banquet facilities. They're staying open all hours of the night. Who knows what's going on in there. They're not up to code. And so we have the special approval land use process, which if you have a church or place of worship, for example, it's permitted in a residential area, but in order to get approval to build a church, you have to go through that special approval land use process to make sure that it complies with the neighborhood standards. So in the same way, the first aspect of this is we're just going to make sure that if you're opening up a banquet facility, that it's of the right characteristic, that it fits in with the orderly development of the surrounding area. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is the licensing portion. And this, Mr. Marshall-Owens, is I think where you got a little bit tripped up with that chart. We think about banquet facilities, as Mr. Jefferson pointed out. I think you said pings, and you maybe were referring to ping-on or pennas. Maybe I missed pennas? Okay. So pennas. Pennas is a banquet facility that I think most people in the community are familiar with. They do banquets, and that's all they do. So their primary use or their principal use is a banquet center. So we have that. And then the other example Mr. Jefferson gave was Maple Lane. Maple Lane is obviously a golf course. If you think about Maple Lane, you're going to go there to golf. But golf courses oftentimes also have banquet facilities. The banquet facility is an accessory or ancillary use. It's the secondary use. So if you're going to be opening up any banquet facility in Sterling Heights, whether it's the primary source of your business's banquets or it's a secondary source, you need to go through this approval process. And if I understand correctly, Mr. McLeod, if your banquet and event facility is the principal use, you need to get that special approval land use through the Planning Commission, correct?
That's correct.
If it's a secondary use, like Maple Lane, for example, and Maple Lane wants to have a banquet facility, you would not need to go through the special approval land use process. You would get administrative review from the city planner's office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the chart, the flow chart showed if you are a primary banquet facility, I want to open up a competitor to Penna's, I would have to go to special approval land use through the planning commission. I would apply, and they would put it on the agenda at the planning commission, and I'd have to do everything that's required. The second so that's for a primary banquet facility. If I'm a ancillary use, like at Maple Lane, I don't go to the planning commission, but I still have to apply for the license. It's reviewed by the city planner. Now, once we get through that review period, either through the planning commission or the city planner's office, if the property abuts residential, there's a secondary review. If you're abutting residential, you may have to provide what's called a nuisance mitigation plan. So if you have been operating, like I believe Penna's has been operating continuously, I doubt that they have any nuisance complaints against them in the last 12 months, so they don't need to provide a nuisance mitigation plan at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If they're a brand-new facility, though, if I'm applying for a new facility, do I need to provide a mitigation plan, a nuisance mitigation plan then?
If you're adjacent to residential, yes.
Okay, and if I've been in business and I get 2 complaints in a 12-month period, then I would have to provide a nuisance mitigation plan, right?
Correct.
And that nuisance mitigation plan is just to make sure it's something that's going to be proposed by the owner of the banquet facility. And they're going to say, we abut residential, we've been getting complaints, here are the complaints that we've been getting, and here's what we're going to do to make sure that those complaints are addressed. The city planner's office will review the mitigation plan, and how will it be approved or tweaked?
Nuisance mitigation plans are approved or reviewed and approved by the planning commission.
Okay, so it has to go to the planning commission again at that point. The planning commission holds a public hearing, obviously. Residents who are upset about the banquet facility can come out and explain their concerns, and the plan can be tweaked by the planning commissioners themselves, who will make sure that the residents are protected. And that's essentially what that flow chart said. The only one other thing I'll add is that, as Mr. McLeod said, some businesses never stay open past 11 p.m. Some banquet facilities or ancillary banquets don't stay open past 11 p.m., but they might on New Year's Eve, for example. So if on New Year's Eve they want to stay open until 1 a.m., they don't want to go through this entire review process, so there will be a temporary licensing process that you can get up to 2 times per year. Correct, Mr. McLeod?
That's correct.
And so in a nutshell, I think that's really what we're doing here. And the main concern is protecting the residents, protecting the competitive nature of the banquet facilities, because we've found that some of these banquet facilities are creating loopholes and cutting corners, staying open all hours of the night, allowing illegal gambling operations, for example, and that needs to be shut down. And as Mr. Shannon rightly pointed out, it seemed like some of these banquet facilities would almost say to the customer, yeah, your banquet can go to any hour of the night, we're gonna get ticketed $500, so I'll charge you $500 and you pay the ticket and stay open as late as you want. And we can't let that happen anymore. So they do that once, they get ticketed. They do it again, they get ticketed again, and their license could get suspended for a year or ultimately revoked. So it puts a lot of teeth behind the ordinance and gives the city the ability to enforce this and really make sure that all the banquet facilities are operating as they should be and protects the residents. So I'm in support of it, and I'll be voting yes. Any further discussion on this item? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We have a second item. That was, I believe, the zoning portion, and we need to handle the regulatory portion. Who would like to make that motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Sarowski.
resolved to introduce an amendment to Chapter 12 of the Sterling Heights City Code to establish licensing regulations pertaining to the establishment and operation of banquet and event facilities and accessory banquet or event uses.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda tonight is an ordinance adoption to adopt the final amendment to the appropriations ordinance for the 2016-2017 fiscal year. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to adopt the final amendment to the appropriations ordinance for the 2016-17 fiscal year.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on any item on the consent agenda? Mr. Norgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I want to talk about item E, to adopt a resolution in support of Selfridge Air National Guard Base being selected as the site for the F-35 Lightning II aircraft mission. I want to thank the city and the council and you, Mr. Mayor, for putting this on the consent agenda, also city administration. I think this is a very important project for Selfridge. This aircraft is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The repair parts alone, a lot of them actually come from our city and in the Macomb County area, all up and down Van Dyke and our defense corridor. Selfridge is in a little bit of trouble, as most of you know. Over the years, we've lost the 191st Fighter Interceptor Squadron. We've lost a Military Air Transport Command. We've lost some other garrisons. In order to keep Selfridge viable for the future, we have to do everything we can to keep this aircraft. It doesn't belong at a municipal airport in Wisconsin. It doesn't belong in the middle of nowhere in some desert. We have to get it here in Macomb County. I would ask, and I don't have any power to do this, but I would ask each and every one of you, like you want us to call our representatives or the fireworks ordinance, to keep calling the senators. I know we don't have Mr. Carr 11 anymore, but he used to be a big defense guy. I really think it would be to be the best interest of everybody if you got on the phone and called representatives and senators and try to get this here. I'm sure General Slocum would appreciate that. And one thing I am hoping for is that this decision gets done very quickly. I think it would be a nice feather in our cap that from August 18th to the 20th, when they have the open house, that they could actually announce that we got this aircraft in the unit. So I would urge you to do all you can. Please just don't look at this as a consent agenda item. I would love to know that you're out calling people, even if you have to call the Pentagon. They will take your phone calls. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Norgrove. Anyone else on the consent agenda? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any, with no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item is a consideration item to approve an employment agreement between the City of Sterling Heights and Mark D. Vanderpool, City Manager. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Mrs. Elias, Miss Elias, sorry.
Elias. I was reading about it, and first of all, I want to thank you for being here 13 years. It must be that you're doing a good job working with the council. But I just wanted to bring up, when you guys were talking about the different cities that you were basically relating it to, could you be so kind as to provide the citizens as well as us here what the current total benefit package that is not named? Since you named some of the other benefits that the other cities are providing and including that in the summary, could you please tell us what the total benefit package that he's getting right now in his 401k, in his insurance, as well as vehicles or other benefits that are out there? Could you do that for us? Thank you. That's all I wanted to ask.
Thank you, Ms. Elias. Mr. Marshallones.
Harry Marshallones, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Vanderpool. By the way, thank you very much. Appreciate the additional explanation of what was being touted by the gentleman here. Mr. Vanderpool, I would tell you that I have absolutely no problem with anything that would keep him on the job. I know he walks a fine line many times between the unions, the employees, and our council members and our mayor. Everybody has an idea. They all probably present them. Probably sometimes they make an airplane out of it and throw it in his office. And he's got to make it work somehow. So far, he always has. I appreciate that. You're a good man, and I hope you're here long after I'm gone. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Marshallones. Anyone else on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
resolve to approve the employment agreement between the City of Sterling Heights and Mark D. Vanderpool and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Zarko?
Well, we should have a discussion. I don't think we really need it if you've watched a council meeting, or have come to City Hall for anything, but I think it's important that we do tell residents that we have a great city manager. He certainly loves the city. I did hear one of the residents asked about the benefit package. When Mr. Vanderpool hired on to us, actually it was Mrs. Schmidt and myself and Mr. Bohorsky that pretty much negotiated the first contract to bring him into the city. And there were times when we say, well, hey, we'll just start all over, forget it. But over the years, there were concessions that Mr. Vanderpool gave us in that first contract that are still there today. And one of them is retiree health care, and the other one is a defined pension plan that he has a 401 just like people do in the private sector. And probably the other cities that we mentioned here, their city managers still have those defined pensions as well as retiree medical benefits. So those are two things that he gave up in the very beginning we haven't added. There were years that we took money away from him. So we've certainly gone through the hard times. It was probably within a couple of years after Mr. Vanderpool first came here that we had the world economic crisis that he helped pull the city through. We were very, very lucky that we were able to navigate those waters by asking for concessions from our employees, whether it be in benefits and actually salaries. We put our hands in their pockets and took money away from them. And now now that things are getting better, we're trying to give that back. So I think that it's important that we pay him for his worth, and he's worth really more than what we are paying him, but this is all he's getting this year. Nothing further.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. Just briefly, Mr. Vanderpool, with this new contract, I believe, is still under what some of our comparable cities are paying their city managers. And Mr. Vanderpool has seen us through some really tough times, some tough lawsuits, some economically, some tough times, and our employees, all of our employees, helped us through that financial crunch, 2008 and a little further. Now that our other employees are receiving some of that back, I think it's due time that we also compensate Mr. Vanderpool as well to give him back some things that he gave to us during those tough times. So I am very comfortable with this new contract.
Council, any further discussion? If not, just a few brief comments. I'm very comfortable with this contract, and I commend Mr. Vanderpool on the job he's done as our city manager over the last decade and more. I know this is a very awkward situation for Mark, that not a lot of times when you are asking for a raise or asking for a review of your performance, it's done on public access television for the entire city to see. But he can be proud of the record he has, and we put some of it in the backup information for you. But if you look at any department in the city and any of the improvements that have been made in the city in the last decade, Mark has his fingers all over them, whether it's improvements in the police department or the fire department or DPW, our Parks and Recreation, recreating recreation. Mark really spearheaded that. He's overseen the city go through incredibly difficult financial times where we've seen our employment shrink to probably historic lows. and without an impact on city services. And so, to me, that's the real legacy he's going to leave behind when he does move on someday, hopefully not soon, is that he really has made a huge impact on this community, a lot more than we could ever get away with paying him. But we're all public servants here, and including Mr. Vanderpool, and I think this is, a passion of his. Serving the residents of Sterling Heights is a passion of his. Make no mistake, he's paid handsomely, but his talents in the private sector could command a lot more than he's getting here. And so we're lucky to have him, and I'm happy to support this. So with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on the agenda tonight is to consider nominations to City of Sterling Heights boards and commissions. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Mr. Judnick.
Joe Judnick, Sterling Heights. Over the last couple of years, it's been increasingly concerning to me that when these residents are up for renomination or nomination, that it's always a 7-0 vote. I want to know, as a council, are you looking into the resumes? Are you doing any type of research? Or are you just rubber stamping this through? Back 6-7 years ago, when our mayor was a councilman, Mike Taylor, every time these would come up, Mike Taylor would vote no every single time. The vote was always 6-1. He voted no every time. So he was obviously doing his homework because he didn't feel that these candidates were not qualified for the job. Either that or he was just really immature. So, but I hope that everyone that you are voting to these different seats and these different boards, I hope that they're qualified for the position. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Judnick. Anyone else? Mr. Jefferson?
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. I don't know if we ever got a decision on whether board or commission members could have a Facebook page where they could host a Facebook page where they could be the primary source, like the Sterling Heights political page or Sterling Heights election page, because I got throughout before the last meeting, before I got to speak. But the meeting beforehand, something happened to the people who don't know. It was a member of a board or commission. He has a competing Facebook page, and he allows everyone to speak on his page, not like the other person. And he got his position taken away from him. So I was wondering if any of these people running for boards or commission, have we checked in there? Have we come up with some kind of plan toward people with Facebook pages or blogs? Because, like I said the last time, that seemed to be unfair because that person has a competing page. Or even do these people, are we checking their Facebook pages and blogs? Because if you speak out against Mayor Taylor or over there against Nate Shannon, they usually come back and give it to you, and we saw what happened a little over a month ago to Mr. Balan. So hopefully you folks can answer that question. I know you won't, but can you answer that question? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else on this item? If not, Council, there are two boards or commissions. The first is the Board of Review. This is a city council appointment. Does anyone have a nomination?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Zarko?
Resolved to nominate Walt Blessed for consideration as an appointee to the Board of Review at the July 18th, 2017 regular city council meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mrs. Zarko?
Well, I guess my question would be through the chair to the clerk. At the next meeting, will there be an expiration date mentioned in the suggested action? Because we don't have one for the.
Mrs. Riska, I believe, since this is a nomination, I don't know if it necessarily needs one. Do you know?
Yeah, in the past, we haven't had a term for the nomination. It will be at the next meeting for the appointment.
Okay.
If we decide to go
Thank you. That was my only question.
Okay. Council, any further discussion? Just procedurally, because this is really one of the only times I can mention it, I just want to clarify, I didn't vote no on every nomination that came up before. I looked at every, Mr. Judnick, I didn't interrupt you, and I appreciate you won't interrupt me. Thank you for that courtesy. So no, I didn't vote no on everyone that would come up. I'd look at each individual and make that determination based on each individual. So with no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is the Board of Ordinance Appeals 2, alternate member. This is a city council appointment. Is there anyone who has a nomination for this opening? If not, I would entertain a motion to postpone the nomination to the July 18, 2017 regular city council meeting.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is to consider appointments to City of Sterling Heights boards and commissions. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak? Mr. Jefferson.
Charles Jefferson again, Sterling Heights. Since this is the appointment phase of the process here, can Gary Lusk please tell us about these people that are being appointed? Because we have a nomination appointment first, and then 2 weeks later, we come back with the appointment process. And in that 2-week process, you folks are supposed to find out and gather information to tell the public about this person, or why you're picking this person, or how you feel about this person getting this position. So tonight, we're asking Gary Lusk to please explain to us his appointments of these individuals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else on this item? If not, council, I believe there are 5 boards or commissions. The first is the Local Development Finance Authority, and this is a mayoral appointment with confirmation by the city council. Having spoken with the city clerk and reviewing the application by James Ruma, I'd like a council member to make the nomination or appointment of James Ruma to the LDFA.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
By recommendation of the mayor, resolved to appoint James Ruma to the Local Development Finance Authority to a term ending June 30th, 2019, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the Arts Commission. This is a city council power of appointment. Is there anyone who has a nomination for one unexpired term? If not, I would entertain a motion to postpone to the, what would it be, Mr. August 1st, if we want to go? If we want to go 2 meetings, I would entertain a motion to postpone to the August 1st meeting.
Support.
Well, I
Oh,
need a motion.
so moved. So moved, sorry.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is the Beautification Commission, 12 members, 1 vacancy. This is a city council appointment. Does anyone have a nomination or appointment to the Beautification Commission? If not, I would entertain a motion to postpone to the August 1st meeting.
So moved.
Support, it's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is the Election Commission. This is a 3-member board with 1 vacancy. The term of John Gardner is vacant, and he is not seeking reappointment. Is there anyone on the council who has a appointment to this board?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolved to appoint Wayne Davis to the Election Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2019, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is the Historical Commission. This is a 7-member board with 1 vacancy, the term of Ruth Ann Shinzing. Ms. Shinzing is not seeking reappointment. So, council, this is a city council appointment. Is there anyone who has an appointment to this board?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolved to appoint Cynthia Appleton to the Historical Commission to a term ending June 30th, 2020, subject to the appointee meeting the qualifications set forth in Charter 4.03 and taking the oath of office within 2 weeks.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And that concludes that portion of our agenda. We'll move on to communications from citizens. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on any item not on tonight's agenda? Mr. Norgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have two issues. The first one, I'd like to know why the video here at the council chambers no longer shows the people sitting at either one of the desks and your faces from the audience. Your faces are blocked with the new computer screens. I'm just wondering if we're still experiencing technical glitches or if that was done on purpose. Another thing I would like to address is respect for city council. At the last meeting, I saw some things here that I haven't seen in the past 20 years. I would ask that if people are going to come here to city council meetings, that they would respect the city council people and the mayor and the city employees that work for this city. There is no need to start arguments and fights. If you have something to say, say it. The city council and the mayor are not obligated to answer our questions here. They don't have to answer anything. What I would like to see is more decorum and respect in these chambers. And I would like to put that out there to everyone, even the people that you can hear talking in the back when other people are speaking. In my, well, over 20 years of coming here, goes back to the newspaper strike, Mrs. Koski, and when they wanted to put the UN flag over City Hall, even before that. I've seen a lot of things, from the Teamsters coming in, threatening council people. Usually it goes away after those issues disappear. But clearly there's some issues here that are not going away. And I would like to address the people in this audience who come here and the people who plan on coming here in the future. The city council and our mayor and the city employees deserve our respect. They deserve to be heard, and they don't deserve to be sworn at or disrespected. That's all I have to say, and I hope people here pay heed to what I'm saying. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Norgrove. Anyone else under communications from citizens? Take Mr. White first.
Dennis White, Sterling Heights. From what I saw on TV and heard on the radio, there was a serious accident, I believe, the afternoon following the last council meeting near Utica and Hayes. I heard that a police captain stated that it was a problem with an aggressive driver and that 2 children had to be transported to Children's Hospital. My question is, does the city have a plan to address aggressive drivers in the city so it would allow people that are driving in the city to not feel that they're going to be run over by people driving aggressively when they're trying on a daily basis to go from point A to point B without getting run over?
Thank you, Mr. White. Who'd like to be next under communications? Mr. Jefferson.
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. To Mr. Norgrove, that respect should run both ways. Mr. Vanderpool, I asked you once before about that sign that's on 17 and Van Dyke advertising bowling, swimming, and hotel rooms. There's nothing around that area that even signifies bowling, swimming, hotel rooms, or anything anymore. Can you tell us when that's coming down or when it's going to be left up? I know it's not a viable question because I don't live over that way, but that's where the blight starts. Number 2 question, Mr. Vanderpool, I'd like to ask you a question about your neighbors and your neighbors being in Utica Community Schools. Since the last meeting, 47 teachers have been let go from that that particular organization. And the reason I bring that up is because in your famous speech that I always quote, you said that when CEOs move to Sterling Heights, there's more than tax breaks that they look at. And a few years ago, we had John Speaker come up here before this mic, and he asked if, he didn't ask, he was telling us that schools in this school district was closing down, and they were going to move students into the classrooms. Is Utica Community Schools having a problem? Because as we all know, Mayor Duggan, that's one of his biggest deals is the school system in Detroit. So if we need to do something about that problem now, can you tell us what we need as a community to do about that problem? Was that just an accounting deal? The 47 got let go? Was to do the retirement or whatnot? Because no matter what we do in the community, if the school system don't thrive, it's just a done community. And the third point, Mr. Vanderpool, we got Sterling Fest coming up. And last year's Sterling Fest, there was a booth with the Parks and Recreational people involved in that. And that seemed to be a political deal there. This year, will people be allowed to campaign with inside of Sterling Fest, just like last year? Before last year, I would agree with you, no one should do it, but since it was allowed last year, I think the the paradigm has been changed. Unless something is really changed, we have a city clerk, maybe she could provide us with the ordinance where it says that here in Sterling Heights, we have a public park that you can't advertise, that you can't campaign you can campaign for 365 days or 362 days out of the year, except for the 3 days which was publicly funded by the residents of Sterling Heights. It's still a public park. I don't see how come you can't do it. How come people aren't allowed to walk around with vote for SpongeBob SquarePants on their shirt, or whoever's running for a political campaign, since now it's been done. Maybe our city attorney can explain how a person's First Amendment rights to wear a vote for SpongeBob or whoever running for office that week or this year, how it doesn't violate their First Amendment rights. And again, I don't know why we spent money for these TVs when they're useless. We could have kept the old system.
All right.
You're not going to show stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson.
All right.
Mrs. Early?
Jasmine Early, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I can kind of answer part of the question from Mr. Jefferson, and the attorney can confirm or clarify. I checked with a civil rights lawyer the time that Mr. Vanderpool came with a police officer and took me out of the festival because in his words, I was campaigning. I had a sign in a wagon that I was going to get lunch at the festival. The lawyer told me that no, I should not have been kicked out, escorted by an officer from the Sterling Heights Festival. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. There should not be any ordinance, and yes, people are free to walk with whatever teacher if they have, or any campaigns, and you do not have the right to ask anybody to leave the ground. It is a public place, and you can check with civil rights lawyers. I did, because that was not fair. That was done to me. Anyway, in another note, a more joyful note, I want to remind the residents about the American Polish Festival coming out on July 7, this coming Friday, from Friday through Sunday. I enjoy every year that I go there. It's really nice. I invite the residents to go and visit it. They start on Friday at 4 p.m. The different days, they have different hours, but it's in Saturday and Sunday in the morning and end up at 9 p.m. on Sunday. That will be nice to see residents there. The other thing that I would like to ask the residents is if they will please call your state rep. We had Henry Yanes and Diana Farrington covering our districts. Please call asking them to vote no in the Good Jobs Bill package. If the city council don't know what it's about, it's a bill that is compressed with the Senate Bill 242, 243, and 244. The proponents recognize that lower taxes help economy. However, the bad news of that bill is that they want tax privileges only for a select few with special access to decision makers in Lansing. That is not fair. I'm asking my state rep, Henry Yanes, to vote no. Please, as Mrs. Farrington, the same. The phone number for Mr. Yanes is 517-373-2275. And for Mrs. Farrington, 517-373-7768. Or go to their webpage. You can find the numbers there. We need them voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Early. Anyone else who'd like to speak? Mr. Judnick?
Yeah, Joe Judnick, Sterling Heights, to answer Mr. White's question about if the police are going to enforce all the aggressive drivers. Well, it doesn't have to go any further than the mayor. You know, Mike, Mayor Taylor, you post stuff on Facebook, so now I got to call you out on it. You went ahead and you bragged about driving up where there's a lane with an arrow during construction. You bragged about you drove all the way up to the end and then cut in, and then you said that a Clinton Township police officer gave you a ticket. And you went on to tell me that the police officer was wrong, that he doesn't know the law. Well, it's guys like you that make guys like me want to cut you off, because if you talk to either one of these two officers here, there's a law that you cannot go to the very end of the arrow. You have to merge as soon as you possibly can. And your contention that, well, there's an empty lane there that's 1,000 feet, well, that's about, I think, the limit by the law. I think you have to merge within 1,000 feet. So just you were talking about tickets for the people that have the banquet centers and that. Well, just keep doing that. You're going to just keep getting the tickets because the officer was right and you were wrong. Glad to see you said one thing tonight, Mr. Lusk. Last meeting you didn't say one word. So even these nominations, they're on your computer or something. All you got to do is read it. Why don't you just get a little bit more involved so I know you're doing a little something for your paycheck. Now that Jeff Pohorsky has been appointed to our assistant city manager, Mr. Vanderpool, one of the things you mentioned that he's going to be in charge of economic development. You mentioned, or I don't know if he's going to be the director or if he's in charge of it somehow. If that's the case, I don't believe that we need Luke Bonner anymore and his almost $200,000 a year salary. He was here again today with 2 more tax abatements. Is he bringing economic development to the city, or is he, every time he shows up here, it's costing the residents this money, millions of dollars in taxes? So if Mr. Pohorsky can do Mr. Bonner's job, I would like to see that his contract's not renewed and we can put that $200,000 to better use. The attorney that owns the property on Poplar on Mound Road, that's been here several times rezoning his property, he owns a house on that property, and that house is completely dilapidated. I'd like to have somebody from the Board of Ordinance, a code officer, go there. The gutters have trees 2 feet tall growing out of it all the way around the house. The paint is peeling off the walls. There's grass growing in all the saw cuts in the driveway and the sidewalk. The place has never been weeded. It's the worst eyesore in the city of Sterling Heights. There's nothing worse. I'd like to see that taken care of. The last item, one thing, Mayor, you and our entourage went to Washington, D.C., and it was about trying to get funds for Mound Road. I haven't heard anything about that either way. Everybody knows Mound Road is as bad or worse than Hall Road is. And I wanted to know if you can tell the residents if, between you and the mayor of Warren and the city managers and our state representatives, if you were able to get any funding, or if any funding is coming to fix that. The last thing, a farmer's market that's going to be going on tomorrow night. I want to thank the 2 farms that are going to be setting up at the farmer's market. And for the others, Howdy Doodles Ice Cream Truck, Deepwater Shrimp, K&T Cake Pops, Young Living Essential Oils, Mrs. Pruitt's Cha-Cha, Black Iron Coffee Roasters, LJ Designs, Hey Honey, Let's Pop, Uncle Henry's Gourmet Meats, Hill Mail Order Company, Bath and Body Care Products, Sanity, Lacey's Lunchbox, Cottage Garden, Ray Schindler, Local Kids Book Author, Uncle Calvin's, there's a lot of uncles, Calvin's Sweet Potato Pies, and Friendly Fran's Baked Goods, Aaron Knight Productions, and Growing Green Gardens. What's that got to do with a farmer's market? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Judnick. Anyone else who'd like to speak under communications from citizens? If not, I'll close that portion and move on to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, anything you want to respond to tonight?
Here, I can respond to a few items. First, let me respond to the video system again, because it's taking all of us some time to get used to it, myself included. First, we had to replace our former system because it was entirely analog. We could not get any parts for it. It became very expensive to maintain, and the quality was eroding quickly. What you see now is improved sound. The capability for the audience at home has been improved, and also for those in this council chambers when there's a presentation. For example, when there's development plans being laid out on the table, we haven't really seen that yet, but they're much more clearer than what used to be under the old system. When we have PowerPoint presentations, we're still working through some glitches like tonight. Everything is much clearer when you look at it on the monitors. When we have a video that we might have to play, it's much clearer on the monitors, and so on. So that's the purpose for the monitors in the room. There's really not a need to show live people on the monitors, because you're hearing, you can see them live, you can hear them live. But beyond that, the downside of having digital technology is that when you have a live audience like this, and you're trying to portray the live audience speakers on the cameras in the room, not at home, there's a slight delay between the voice and the actual and the actual visual image, because the digital signal has to pass through a computer. This is an industry-wide issue. If you go to any conference center where there's this digital technology, all you'll see on the screens in the room are presentation materials, like I just mentioned, not the live people speaking. So that's why there's this change. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get used to it, but we believe that the benefits that you'll ultimately see will vastly outweigh the downside of not seeing us on the screens in the room. We have to get accustomed to actually looking at the live speaker and focusing on that while we're in this room. The issue regarding aggressive drivers, our police department works very hard on this. In fact, we just completed a campaign out on M59 where we had undercover workers disguised as construction workers actually signaling to officers down the road of people that were texting and driving. So, yeah, that's just one small example of how we're trying to address aggressive drivers or distracted drivers. We also have an accident prevention unit that's out on the road every day looking for aggressive drivers. And we write a lot of citations, thousands of citations for aggressive driving every year, and distracted driving and the like, and speeding and so on. So we do the best we can. However, we simply can't catch everyone. The Van Dyke sign and 17-mile Van Dyke sign, that is under a consent agreement. The former property owner of Sunnybrook still has the legal authority to advertise on that sign. We are now litigating that. We believe we will ultimately prevail, but it's still going through the process, the legal process. We do hope that we will be able to remove that sign in short order. There was some discussion about Utica Community Schools and the fact they had to lay off teachers. As reported in the newspaper, those layoffs were targeted layoffs where they had lost funding or grant funding on very specific projects. Excuse me, but let me say this in a general sense. There's no question that school enrollment is decreasing in Utica Community Schools. And the question was raised this evening, what do we do about that? And it's an excellent question, because we have to have solid schools, and we have to make sure that they're continuing to improve, and they're an attraction for families to move to the area. Thankfully, Utica Community Schools still is, as is Warren Consolidated School District. But so what do? We do exactly what we are doing as a community. We're reinvesting in the community. We're reinvesting in quality of life services. We're making it more attractive for families to continue to live here and not move elsewhere, because now they can get quality of life services here. Farmers market, an ice rink, a skate park, canoeing, kayaking down the Clinton River, expanded bike hike trails, a dog park, a new community center, and all 24 neighborhood parks improved. These are quality of life assets, and that's what keeps people in communities and causes people to look at Sterling Heights in a new way because of a higher quality of life. That's what we need here. We need families, we need kids here, and that will help slow the decline, or maybe even reverse the decline of the school districts in this area. So what we're doing, and thankfully the community recognized it by approving the Recreating Recreation proposal, is what we need to be doing. Now, it's just one piece of the puzzle, but a very important piece of the puzzle. So I'm glad Sterling Heights is headed down the right path. Communities that ignore these services and don't reinvest continue this slow, perpetual decline. And when the schools get to a point of no return, then it's all over. And there's too many examples of that in Michigan, countless examples. And Sterling Heights, thankfully, is not going to be one of those examples. Political activities at Sterling Fest, we promote that, or I should say, we inform individuals on our website where political activity can take place. There's designated areas. It's not banned. It's simply there are designated areas where that activity can take place. It's been thoroughly reviewed by countless examples of case law across the country and many festivals across the country, and it's a best practice and an industry standard, the policy we have in place. There was some mention about economic development and whether or not we need to spend the money we do on economic development resources. Sterling Heights really is a great example of an unbelievable amount of economic development going on. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find the billions, that's with a B, the billions of dollars being reinvested in Sterling Heights, from SHAP to Ford to the suppliers, to the defense industry, General Dynamics, BAE, all their suppliers, all the commercial retail establishments up and down our major corridors. And it's probably the most activity we've seen made perhaps in our city's history. So what does that mean for all of us? It means that residents continue to enjoy a very low tax rate. One of the reasons we have one of the lowest tax rates, in the lowest in Macomb County of a city, is because of our very robust commercial and manufacturing investments in the city. So I would say we need to continue to do what we're doing. Spending money on our economic development team, some are consultants, some are in-house, has been, I believe, one of our wisest investments in the city in recent history, maybe our history. There was also a question about Mound Road. That activity is going on as we speak. We're continuing to work very hard to secure the $217 million that is needed to reconstruct Mound Road from 696 all the way up to M59. Now, the good news is that the first grant has been publicized. Our first application is due in the next 60 days. Our second application will be due in approximately 90 days, and our Defense Access Road application is being worked on as we speak. So there's a lot of activity, daily activity, going on to secure the money. You can imagine the amount of effort to secure $217 million. It's not only federal grants, it involves state. In fact, there's a meeting with MDOT this Friday to talk about this very topic. Not only federal grants, state grants, local matches between the county, Sterling Heights, the city of Warren. There's a plethora of stakeholders involved in this effort, and I really do hope that we have some good news to share in the next year. This is not going to be a project that's going to be completed in the next year. It's going to be a multifaceted project that's going to encompass many years. In the meantime, the county's going to continue to spend, unfortunately, $3 to $4 million a year just to maintain or repair Mound Road. It's only a Band-Aid, though. And Mayor, I think that's all for tonight.
All right, great job, Mr. Vanderpool. Thank you for addressing all those issues. Mr. Koszybski, any items tonight?
We do have, as reported by Mr. Vanderpool, a couple of matters for closed session.
Okay, I'll open it up to council members for reports, new business or unfinished business. Mrs. Schmidt.
I have just a couple of things tonight. First of all, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool, we spoke a couple of months ago about Utica Road and the dangers of not having bypass lanes for those left turns. Utica Road is a county road, so we have no jurisdiction over putting in those bypass lanes, which would have probably prevented the fatality not too long ago if that was paved. Can we rally the troops and you know, call the county back and see where we're at with that? It's from Hayes until Van Dyke is all gravel shoulders. So there are some streets in that stretch, and if we could really have them address the need for those paved bypass lanes for those left turns, I would appreciate it. Also, I'm sure all of us received numerous phone calls and emails about the fireworks over the last couple of days. I know as a pet owner, the magic cheese with the Benadryl in it just doesn't cut it. There's something that these state legislatures have to do. I implore everybody to get a hold of Mr. Rocca, Mr. Yanez, Ms. Farrington, and really stress to them the importance of the dangers of what's going on because of a stupid law at the state level. I received a phone message today from a young lady with cat issues because of the fireworks, and she also said that she, along with one of her neighbors, had the Chinese lanterns landing near their homes. Us in Sterling Heights, we have an ordinance that prohibits the sale and the launching of those Chinese lanterns. Unfortunately, this resident lives on the border of Troy, and we have no control what is set off in Troy and happens to meander into our city. So hopefully our residents are adhering to that ordinance, although with the amount of fireworks that we've been hearing, I highly doubt anybody's adhering to any ordinances. We do have an ordinance, we just have no control as to what fire flies into our city from another municipality. On a good note, I had the privilege of meeting a Boy Scout who is a resident of Sterling Heights. He attends Mott High School. A very nice young man, Jacob Ciotti. He asked if I had some community service he could do tomorrow. And so I called Mrs. Gio Lombardo downstairs and I said, you know, Sue, do we have anything for this nice young man to do? So he went downstairs with me, received a trash picker and a garbage bag, and he lives near Avis Park, and he said he would clean the park. So it was a couple weeks ago on a Friday, it was pouring down rain, And he sends me an email at 7:30 in the morning that says, Mrs. Schmidt, do you think it's okay if I wait until the rain stops to go and do my community service? And I said, absolutely, at your convenience. You know, we wouldn't want you to be out there. So the next day, he went out there, sent me pictures. We sent him with one bag. This young man spent 8 hours at Avis Park and had about 20 bags of garbage that he picked up in Avis Park. So I want to commend him, and I would love to see more of us get involved in cleaning our community parks and just maintaining our community the way we like to have it. So that, I like to end on a good note, is the end of my report.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Anyone else on council? Mrs. Zarko?
I just want to add that about the fireworks and our state reps. I don't think we're ever going to, statewide, going to have representatives and senators repeal the fireworks ordinance. What I would like to see is that they give more local control back to the communities, because what in southeast Michigan, when you think how populated we are and having all of these fireworks go off is different than if you're up north and the nearest home is 1.5 miles away from you. So it's completely different. So they might never repeal it, but if they could give more local control back to us is what I would really hope for. That's it.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Okay, and hopefully final, but I did want to thank the speaker for mentioning what we did have on the consent agenda. We are very lucky to have a National Guard base here in this state, and my husband flew out of there for 13 years, excuse me, 7 was at the other base. But we lived a long time working out of Selfridge, and it is a wonderful base, and we need to support the F-35 to come here. So yes, call your state reps, your national reps. We signed the resolution that's going to be going hopefully to not Carl Levin, but Sandy Levin, Debbie Stabenow. She's been called by me personally. We have people that we can call. Call everybody that you can if you find it in your time frame, because it's important. This state, especially the Southeast Metro Detroit area, we have the ability to both build the parts and keep the parts going for this aircraft. We can do so much. We are truly the arsenal of this country. We build things here that you can hardly imagine, and not even 20 miles away from here. It's a wonderful place to keep us safe. The base keeps us safe, really it does, but it also keeps the United States safe. And so we need to keep these planes, we need to get these planes, we need to keep the planes that we have, and so keep calling. And I really would hope and ask you to do that. And on a great note, August 19th through the 20th is, as the speaker also mentioned, the air show. They're going to have the Thunderbirds are going to be there, the Air Force show, the planes that do all of the acrobatics, and it will be a great time, so please come if you can. So thank you very much.
Council, anyone else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Ms. Riska, could we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Zarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mrs. Rest?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. We will adjourn into closed session, and we will not be returning. Thank you for participating tonight.